Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you joining us here today, and thank you for also being with us this afternoon. We understand that everyone's schedules are busy, and it's so great to see all of us here in this virtual space. So my name is Akemi Chan Imai. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program manager at the Oakland Asian Cultural Center. OACC's mission is to build vibrant communities through API arts and cultural programs that foster intergenerational and cross-cultural dialogue, understanding, collaboration, and social justice. And we are very excited to present this event as part of the Black Arts Movement Business District's FAMFest 2021. FAMFest 2021 International is 31 days of art, culture, education, civic discourse, and networking events offered as a community celebration of our legacy of resilience, our massive reservoir of talent, and our legendary determination for equity and justice for Black people. FAMFest 2021 is a hybrid event offering both virtual and live programming. So for the most up-to-date information on the festival programming, we strongly encourage everyone to head over to bamfest.com. They just have a jam-packed month of incredible programming, and we hope that you have a chance to catch some of those. Before we go into the rest of our program today, we are going to open today's program with a land acknowledgement presented by Kanyon Sayers-Roods. Kanyon is a Costanoan Ohlone and Chumash. She also goes by her given native name, Coyote Woman. She is proud of her heritage and her native name, though it comes with its own backstory and is very active in the Native community. She is an artist, poet, published author, activist, student, and teacher. And Kanyon and her mother, Anne Marie Sayers, are also involved in the preservation of Indian Canyon to provide a space for people in need of land for ceremony. So without further ado, I want to welcome Kanyon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Mishmin Tuhis, Countercut Kanyon, Coyote Woman Sayers-Roods. I am so honored to share space here. I come from Indian Canyon and daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers, who has always taught me that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that, and so I want to offer just my energy and these words in a good way so that my actions and words may honor the ancestors of whose land we are on. If we were gathered in person, I would invite everyone to say back. So I invite you to say to yourself, can I invite you to say Huchin? Huchin is the name of the land that we would be gathered in person on at the Oakland and actually parts of Berkeley. I invite you to also say Chichenyo. Chichenyo is the language of the land. Before English was spoken, before Spanish was spoken here in the Bay Area, before it was known as Oakland, this land has been known as Huchin, and the first language of this land is Chichenyo. And by acknowledging and honoring the first peoples and the histories of these spaces and places that we have settled upon, that we benefit from, that we gather together upon, it's important that we honor truth and history to the best of our ability. So, Kanrakat Kanyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers-Roods, and I am a Southern Ohlone offering land acknowledgements here in this space. And I want to invite you to consider, what does it mean to be a good ancestor in training? We are all Ama Pititakawas. In the Mutsun language, that means people of this land. And if we take time to honor the original Ama Pititakawas, we're taking steps to dismantle settler colonialism and to be in community together. So I would like to offer a grandmother's song to honor our grandmothers, their grandmothers, and in all Mother Earth, for without them and without her, we would not be here. We share this time and space together for a reason. So it's with that humility, that gratitude, that present-mindedness that I offer this song here in this space. And at the end of the song, I invite you to say, oh, because it helps those prayers and those energies and those good intentions to go out in a good way. At least that's California Native word or expression of affirmation. You are welcome to share your own. Ashe, blessed be, amen, oh, but in our community, oh. So if you're ever at a rally, if you're ever at a gathering, you say, oh, at the end of a strong statement, a prayer, a song, you're one with us. So this is Kanyon's grandmother's song. I will use my regalia as a musical instrument because Indigenous peoples, we don't wear costumes, right? And my regalia is my medicine. It's how we traditionally dress and adorn ourselves. But medicine is good energy. Every prayer, every bead was placed in good energy, prayers, and in a good space. So when we work with our regalia and our medicine, we're always in a good space to put good energy. So, Kenyon's grandmother song. Moim hayo kawanam, moim hayo ka, moim hayo ho, moim hayo ko, moim hayo na ayo konale, moim hayo konale, moim hayo kawanam, moim hayo ko. Moi moi na ho, moi moi yo ko, moi moi yo na yo konale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi yo kono, moi moi yo ko. Moi moi na ho, moi moi yo ko, moi moi yo na yo konale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi yo kano, moi moi yo ko, moi moi na ho, moi moi yo ko. Moi moi yo na yo konale, moi moi yo konale. No phone and oh. So welcome to Huchin. Welcome to what we now call and contemporarily call Ohlone territory. And welcome to being in community with Amapira Takawas. Thank you so very much for honoring the ancestors whose land we are on, and may we walk forward in a good way and be good ancestors in training. I thank you for your time and your energy. I'm glad you are here.
Thank you so much, Kanyon. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have your presence here in our space. So next, I want to help transition into the first of our poetry segments for this afternoon, featuring Mush Lee. Mush is a writer, narrative strategist, and CEO of Whole Story Group, LLC. This is an organizational consulting firm founded on the principles of equity storytelling and transformative leadership. She also serves as a Cultural Affairs Commissioner and a member of the Funding Advisory Committee for the City of Oakland. Thank you so much for joining us, Mush, and take it away.
Thanks, Kenny, and thank you to Kanyon. That was a beautiful way to bring us in, and it's always it was really grounding for me. Sometimes, a lot of us we're running from one place to the next, one conversation, one big idea to the next, and so I think Kanyon is absolutely right. Ceremony and ritual is a great way to remind us to be here and now with spirit, with each other. Hey everyone, my name is Mush. I'm honored to be here, part of BandFest. I want to shout out Dr. Ayodele Nzinga, the first Poet Laureate of the great city of Oakland, for organizing this space for us and for the visionary work it takes to bring people from all different walks of life across our city together. So I get to share a couple of poems with you. I've been thinking about, what do I want to share? What's important to say? Because there's a lot going on in the world. And I thought, I don't know if this is the right poem to lead with because I've been in Oakland for over 20 years, and I grew up in Oakland in lots of ways. My parents were small business owners for over 20 years, and starting from the 80s. And so me and my little sister, we were on the corner of 17th and Broadway in the attic on weekends while they worked downstairs. And my first job as a high school person was in North Oakland at the Korean Community Cultural Center. And I thought, okay, let's do a very Oakland-centric poem. And then I thought, well, I kind of want to talk about something else a little bit. As an immigrant child, I bounced around from lots of people's homes. As a kid, I spent the first 5 years being raised by my grandparents. And when my grandparents came here from South Korea, they landed in San Francisco in the beautiful neighborhood of Tenderloin, California. And that's where I got a lot of my game too. So I thought maybe I'll start with that. I know we're all in Oakland. I love Oakland, okay? But this is less about geography. Well, that's not true actually either. This is very much about a rootedness and belonging. So wherever you call home, it's about the environment, the people, the sounds, the smells that make you feel most alive. So this piece is called Nothing Good Was Meant to Grow. I want to tell you a story about an unlikely thing, about home, in a time when every screen and talking head behind it says that we, people of caravan and midnight candles, people of sorrow and seasick scales, people of skin made from scorched earth and moonlight, of poorness and permanent dirge, should be cast beyond the city's walls. It's that kind of story. And it, like, most good stories, starts with chicken. Yes, chicken. Fried chicken is basically my favorite foul and midnight snack. Let's talk about it. Smooth thighs, lean wings, breasts for days. Come on. Holy flesh wrapped in nothing but sheer slip of buttermilk and seasoning only grandmothers and Bill Withers songs can name. As a young girl, every Friday night, my grandmother rescued me from the soundless suburb and brought me here to the hydrolyzed hood where sirens never sleep, menthols lie in the streets. And it's a place where if somebody wants to cut you, they will cut you. They'll make a big announcement about it first. San Francisco, but especially the Tenderloin, at least for me, is a place where I've witnessed grace bestowed to those among us most desperate for it ever before learning how to pronounce God's name. Wait, stop. 3 facts that I need you to know about me first before we go on with this poem. Number 1, in 1971, my Korean grandfather, a Presbyterian minister, arrives alone to San Francisco, where he works part-time as a janitor for the city's public schools. He and Jaime live in the Tenderloin for 25 years before their passing. Fun fact. I don't know if it's a fun fact, but we were one Manchurian train ride away from being enslaved in the North when my therapist asked me to close my eyes and imagine the safest place on earth. I come here, to the corner of Eddie and Polk. Our family can't afford brand name cereal or shoes. So every Friday night, my Jaime takes the $5 round trip bus fare that she has saved from skipping 1 full day of choir practice and buys me a 2-piece from KFC. This ritual meal, it is so simple and sacred. Over my lifetime, the Tenderloin becomes a secret sanctuary. The fried fowl prepared underneath the pulse of brown hands like mine, savored on body-torn blocks of Eddy Street, and they buoyed me, my heart young and confused and horrified and humiliated by the world. Every single time I was afraid I might disappear, I came here to the corner of the globe called Eddy and Polk to know peace, to know a home not unlike the warm walls of my mother's belly. Home grows from absence, like love from an empty tomb. If you have ever felt unseen in this world, even for just a fleeting moment, know home is nothing more than a story of hope, all that's still possible in the world from behind the helm of your grandmother's dress, from inside the steeple of her unmanicured hands, a hidden sublime space that was once an open fist. Home is a shooting star I wish upon. Home is a moving target I run from. Home is the open seat next to the soft eyes on Bart. Home is a promise to see beyond the city's pain. A promise that says we are the same shade of brown at dusk. A love in every place where they have said nothing good can grow. And there's a call. The joys of performing on the internet. Okay, thank you. That was I've just been thinking about my grandparents lately, and you know, it's another thing when you know, that we've all kind of experienced a year of death, but there's something when an entire generation or a lineage is now gone. And I know that the term of, you know, every time an elder leaves this earth, that it's like a library burning down. I've heard that and it resonates so deeply. And so that's in honor of Kyu Hyung Lee and Lee Kum Sun Lee, my grandparents. And this other piece I would like to share is a piece I did actually not too long ago in collaboration with Jeff Chang, who's an incredible local cultural historian, hip hop historian, and journalist. A dear friend of mine, and Renee Tajima Pena, a scholar, filmmaker, Japanese American woman, activist, and they both said, hey, there's a lot of nonsense going on in the news media with the rise of anti-Asian violence. And, you know, what we know to be true as culture creators is that there's so much solidarity between Black communities and AAPI communities, between AAPI communities and the Latinx community and beyond and so forth. And how do we tell a story that counters the nonsense that we remember hearing about from the Watts riots in the 60s, from the Los Angeles uprisings in the early 90s. And so we put this piece together. So it's short, and I hope it finds a home in your heart. When Grace Lee Boggs says, expanding our imagination is what's required, she empowered countless people around the world to find the strength within and together to defy hate and overcome immense legal, social, and political struggles. Her words still hold true today. When we dream, we poke a hole into the sky of stories that says we are better off divided. We disrupt the mythical American parable that promises safety in the separateness of us when we dream. Asian American and Pacific Islanders have always dreamt radically. Perhaps that's what's most important to know about who we be, is that we have been keenly suited to this sacred task of threading justice to joy, stories to solidarity, persistence to power in the pursuit of freedom, and not just for ourselves, and not just alone, but together. When we dream a new America, we carry the courage that once belonged to the giants whose shoulders we stand on today. Wong Kim Ark and Frederick Douglass, a restaurant worker and abolitionist who made the path to citizenship possible for each other, and in turn made it possible for my grandparents and me. When we dream, we declare the deep tradition of movement workers working across the dividing lines, who come together to create a response to racism that's rooted in culture, in power, in solidarity. And this is where dreams come from stirring crowds like Bayard, from striking like Itliog and Huerta and Chavez and Veracruz, from holding the humor and heartbreak of life, still waking up each morning with the humility of wonder. From the radical love between Yuri and Malcolm, Grace and Jimmy, Bruce and Jesse. Every dreamer knows that when we add ourselves to the collective, we are forever connected. I'll stop there with that one. It can go on longer, but I've got one more that I'd like to share, and then I'm really looking forward to introducing our next set of speakers. This is an old one. It's in a book that I got to shout out Deborah Santana, who is the editor of this book. It's called All the Women in My Family Sing, all women of color, talking about life in 21st century America as a woman of color. This piece is called Stay. And I lived in the fruit field for 10 years, gave birth to my son there. And so this was a piece that I wrote not too long after Oscar Grant was shot. And it's remarkable how much still is resonant so many years later. You were born in a pool of blood, steps from the platform Oscar Grant was slain. Stay. My midwife whispers in the 18th hour of labor. My belly is fire and stick of dynamite. My arms are like two white flags. They hang over the edge of the birth tub in surrender. Stay. My darling, I wish we could have met someplace less bloody. But your father and I made you here. And that night you were born, steel train that witnessed Oscar take his last breath, belted a joyous black hoodie howl announcing your birth. In the 21 hours it took to unearth your name from the crux of my flesh, I petitioned God to save me. To rescue me from this death, I begged him to hurl me into the comforts of Oakland Kaiser's manicured halls and picket fence white walls where rooms overflowed with epidural and Pitocin. Your father whispers, stay. You were made for this. Stay is the shortest prayer offered at the altar built on the back of a new lover's head. Stay is an answer Ommas might give their sons if their sons were ever caught between red-blue lights on a blue-black night in a city that's made sport of extinguishing black, brown, and yellow life. Stay. Fighting to stay when everything says run sometimes looks like love. It's gripping to those promises that we make to one another after the rice hits the carpet in the dead of night, after those blue flame fights, after I've outfitted your father in small and shame and everything in us wants to run. Stay, he says. Let's give it 30 more minutes. And if you aren't ready to push, we'll leave on Craigslist. Apricots and fig trees line Alameda's prime real estate. They tease me of sweet suburban afternoons and clean air in California distinguished schools. Outside our bedroom windows, guns bark. They snap, always at somebody's son who never stopped to wonder why the black eyes on the other side of the barrel look just like his. Yes, my city is holy, holy, holy. Oakland be a city of lovers. Be me and my beloved clinging to each other. In the dark, our bodies curve like gold question marks. My city is looming change, is Priuses and Sprite green lowriders gliding down Telegraph and 23rd. Be white and Asian hipsters in boutique bought eyewear. Oakland is top travel destination in the world and the fourth most dangerous city in America, but most dangerous for whom? Be roses in concrete, be sweet poem trapped between gold teeth. Be a city that sprays its prayers across miles and miles along the Amtrak line. Be old school and new gen, fourth generation child of Southern migrants and new wave transplants of Jerry Brown's 10K plan. Is Sunnyside and Trestle Glen, is rich folk and working classes. Oakland and the Ville is artsy youth and tech professionals. Oakland be Adams Point and Temescal, be murder dubs and Deuce and Mac, where broken thieves steal childhood dreams. Stay. My love, when you're older, I'll tell you about survival. When your little rescue bot mind wonders, Oma, why do we live in a place of more cigarettes than stars? More corner stores and bars? Why, Oma, are the men in blue so mean? Why are they so slow to show but so fast to pull when we need them most? I will turn to him and say, Agaya, Seeds don't always get to choose their homes. Some of us are sown. But the loveliest thing I've ever seen was your father pruning a persimmon tree. He turned around and looked at me and said, "We've got to teach it to grow." Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so honored right now to be able to introduce the next set of speakers, but particularly one person in particular who will serve as a moderator for the next panel. Born and raised in Natick, Massachusetts, James Burch grew up with the direct impacts of a punitive carceral system within his immediate family. All three of his siblings have been entangled in the criminal justice systems for their entire lives. To address this, James became a lawyer after attending Yale University in Georgetown Law. Excuse me, Mr. James Burch? I just didn't even know. Okay, here we go. We're not done. Upon moving to the Bay Area, James became an active member of APTP, better known as Anti-Police Terror Project, better known as APTP, eventually becoming the director of policy and a member of the Black leadership team. Hey now, James Burch now works as the policy director for the Justice Teams Network, JTN, a statewide coalition working to end state-sanctioned violence across California. James is also the current president of the National Lawyers Guild of the Bay Area. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to be able to introduce you all and welcome James Burch.
Thank you so much, Mush. You're too kind. I must admit, I'm still reeling from your poetry. I knew that was coming, but still a little difficult to gain my bearings after such beautiful pieces. I worked at St. James Infirmary, very close to Polk and Eddy, and so know that block very, very well. And you have forever changed that KFC and really that whole area for me. So thank you so much. Again, I appreciate all of you for being here. We have an amazing hour in front of us to be spent in conversation with the incredible Michelle Mush Lee, who you just heard, Oakland City Council President Nikki Fortunato Bas, and Oakland's Poet Laureate Ayodele Nzinga. We've heard a little bit about Mush and myself, so please permit me to introduce Council President Bas and our Poet Laureate before we begin. As I mentioned, it's my pleasure to introduce Ayodele Nzinga. Ayodele is the founding and producing director of the Lower Bottom Playaz, Oakland's oldest North American theater company. She is a multidisciplined creative force, a brilliant actress, a producing director, playwright, poet, dramaturg, performance consultant, educator, and community advocate. And yes, we mean every single one of those things when we say them. She is the founding director of the Black Arts Movement Business District Community Development Corporation, founding producer of BAMFest, of which we are pleased and delighted to be a part. And she is Oakland's Poet Laureate. A real pleasure to have you here, Ayodele. Thank you so much. I'm also pleased to introduce Council President and District 2 Council Member Nikki Fortunato Bas. For the last 2 decades, Council President Bas has been an advocate for working people, leading the passage of policies in Oakland to create the building blocks for regional, state, and national change. A resident of District 2 for over 20 years and a lifelong community organizer, Council President Bas started out in Chinatown working with Chinese immigrant garment workers to win their wages back. She also worked in coalitions to raise Oakland's minimum wage with paid sick leave, create living wage jobs on the old Oakland Army base, and reduce diesel truck pollution at the Port of Oakland. And I know personally that's among many, many, many other accomplishments on the council and beyond. So thank you for being here with us, Council President. And again, our time is short, so I want to get straight into the conversation. And I'd love to start by learning more from our panelists about what Black Asian solidarity means to them. And I know, Mush, you got right into it with your poetry, so perhaps we can start with you. Can you tell me more about your work in Oakland and what Black Asian solidarity means to you and your work?
Yeah, thank you. And forgive my mini fan. I'm not trying to be an extra diva with the wind. I sweat really bad, and I'm just trying to save you all that look. I thank you, James, and happy to be here with Council President Bas and Dr. Nzinga. I serve as the vice chair for the Cultural Affairs Commission for the City of Oakland. I'm incredibly honored to do that work. I'm also an artist. I've been and an educator. I've been working in Oakland Public Schools and performing, working with youth development organizations across the city since the early 2000s, maybe. And so, and again, I mentioned before, my parents have been small business owners here, both downtown and in North Oakland. I think, the thing was your question, James, what's the most important thing right now? Or was it just...
Excuse me, really, I want to open up the space to you. I mean, it's a broad topic, and we all do so much. And so I think most practically trying to understand how Black Asian solidarity shows up in your work and your day-to-day experiences.
It's interesting because it was through my art and through poetry, honestly, where I really learned, I really got my game, and I got also a lot my political savvy that I developed as a young person, being politicized at the Korean Cultural Center. It was through Black artists in Oakland and San Francisco and the Bay through an organization called Youth Speaks, who really helped me understand the political landscape and the history of cross-cultural solidarity movements, in particular in the Bay. And so my work, when people say, what's the most radical racial solidarity work you've done, I really look to my artist community and my friends. I'll stop there. I know I can go on, but I'll stop there. So I've got a lot of my kind of artistic game and creative game that I owe to Black artists and mentors of mine from the Bay. When you look inside of a theater space or a poetry venue or a slam or even a writing workshop, time space really does disappear. It is one of the most powerful tools of the arts, particularly spoken word and writing, is to bring two people that have never known each other, who walk entirely different lives, and you put them in a room and ask them to share stories, and suddenly we're closer than ever. And so that's, I've had the privilege of being in those spaces again and again with folks who don't look like me.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. And I know I saw firsthand how your work showed up during this latest budget fight and how your solidarity work showed up. So definitely appreciate you and appreciate what you brought to the table. And appreciate what I'm hearing about the art space, and wondering if you, Ayodele, want to expound upon that, or want to talk about how Black Asian solidarity shows up in any of the many art spaces that you occupy.
I think that solidarity is a core tenet of my being politicized. I think that the Black arts movement, as a sister movement to the Black power movement, is what gave me the basis for understanding not only the necessity, but the history, the common history of people marginalized by white supremacy. And the thought that we have such similar histories with other oppressed people and a singular oppressor, that division is a tool of our oppressor, and that being taught that the way you eat an elephant is to divide it into small bites, then it is better to be the elephant. And so a lot of my experience in working in the continuum here in Oakland begins not only in West Oakland and on the poetry circuit, the art making circuit, but what fed into the mindset that put me in those places in a particular way, working with Eastside Arts Alliance and multiculturalism, again, that wasn't using multiculturalism to evade Blackness. Multiculturalism is often a term that is used by people who won't say the word Black. And if you know me, I enter every space with the conflict of saying I represent Blackness. If we're going to be multicultural, then I got the Black part in it. Everybody else can bring the other multiple parts of culture there. Looking at how the Black arts movement moved struggle around the world and informed many of the movements that currently exist. Solidarity almost becomes a duty if I'm working in that continuum to understand where my strength lies and who I benefit if I pander to division. And I'll give you one solid example is in the desire to animate the Black Arts District. One of the first tasks given me came from Amina Baraka from the East Coast, and that was to put down any division between the East and the West and to find a path to gather as many like-minded people as possible. So this means that we purposely played past the messy border of the Black Arts Movement District, which actually encroaches into what has traditionally been Chinatown. And we used it as a reason to unify and to work together on things that have been historically and currently common issues. So I'll leave it there.
Wow. Thank you so much. I can tell I'm going to leave this conversation full if this is how we're beginning. I know, Council President Bas, you often occupy what is a different space when it comes to your everyday work, but that hasn't necessarily always been the case. So please feel free in responding to the question of how Black Asian solidarity shows up in your work. You don't have to be wearing your council president hat. I know you've done a lot of work in community as well. Your work now is work in community, but in a different way. So just want to open up the space to whatever you want to discuss on the issue.
Thank you, James. And it's really great to be here among some people I deeply, deeply respect. I might actually start by sharing that my parents immigrated, both of them immigrated from the Philippines to the US. And I grew up, of all places, in a small town in Virginia, just outside DC, but a very, very small town. And I think that experience of being one of literally a handful of Asian immigrant families in a mostly segregated Black and white community really left an impression on me and really shaped who I am, what I think about, what I believe, and an understanding of racial injustice from a very, very early age. And so I grew up in Virginia, then I moved to the Bay Area and Oakland shortly after I finished college and grew up organizing here in a very diverse community, but obviously a community with such a rich legacy of activism among the civil rights movement, including the Asian American Pacific Islander communities, and of course the Black Panthers. And so I think just living in those two places gives me a lot of context for being Asian, but also having the empathy to be in solidarity with my Black brothers and sisters. And so, that experience I think is really important because in the work that I've done before City Hall, which has largely been, actually exclusively has been coalition work, it's really been fundamental to me to build multiracial solidarity as a path towards economic justice, to racial justice, to liberation, really understanding that our society right now really values the individual. And that's really where a lot of people have their orientation. It's about how do things impact me or the immediate me and my family. Whereas what I'm trying to do in this newer role as a council member is really look to the collective, the we, and how do we get beyond those individual needs, which, as Ayodele said, can lead to division. It can lead to scapegoating, which we're seeing a lot of over the course of this pandemic. And what I really want to see, what I really want to do is work more at not treating the symptom, but treating the disease and really working to transform those systems that I know each of you works on in your own way. Those systems that are at the root of the problems and the conflicts and the challenges we have, not only here in Oakland, but in many, many cities, which include, the system of racism, the system of economic inequality and capitalism. And so, for me in this newer role as an elected official, I made it really clear when I was inaugurated a few years ago that, yes, I am the daughter of Filipino immigrants, and I am proud to be Oakland's first Filipina council member. I will represent the very diverse AAPI community. And I also recognize how our Black community members have been disproportionately impacted by homelessness, by police brutality, by the lack of good jobs. And I represent the Black community too. And after Kanyon spoke so eloquently and shared a song with us, we know that we live on Ohlone territory. So I will represent our indigenous community as well. And of course, our Latinx, our immigrant communities, our LGBTQ communities. It's really, Oakland is such a beautiful, diverse place. And in that we have to get beyond diversity into real solidarity and really coming together in meaningful ways to lift up our entire community and not approach it as I got to get mine, or I have to focus just on my own needs or my immediate needs, but really look at the whole.
I love that, looking at the whole and getting at the root of the problem. And I wonder if we can stay there for just a moment, because I know, as you said, we're in a political moment where there's a lot of divisiveness, and unity seems to be the last thing on a lot of people's minds. And so I wonder if there are, and Ayodele, I'd love to start with you, Dr. Nzinga, excuse me. And if we can hear from you in your work or your experience, are there lessons that you've learned about solidarity that you think are particularly relevant for this moment? Or are there experiences that you've had in the past that provided learning moments for you that seem to be coming up again today? Because again, a lot of this is cyclical, and a lot of the problems that we're going through today, this is not the first time. And so I just want to defer to your wealth of experience in the area, and wonder if there's any wisdom you can provide to our listeners.
This isn't the first time we've experienced cycles of misinformation, and where the division of the community against itself has set us up for losses that can be long-term. Just to speak directly to a thing that is currently happening, there's been a lot of press and attention on the violence that people are experiencing in Chinatown. And it is sickening to watch. It is horrifying. But I'm also equally horrified by the way that it's being framed. I'm horrified how the violence against fragile elders in that community is being reported in a sort of a vacuum that allows then a bunch of really negative assumptions to be made, and for fear to be a great motivator for a lot of negative things. I'm aware of the way that the statistics for Black hate crimes have grown in the last 2 or 3 years, and over the last year in particular. But these are things that are not reported on in the same context. If we reported on them in the same context, then perhaps we would learn that there seems to be a polarization in the country where things that are not white are targeted and are experiencing rises in crimes against people that perhaps rise to categorization of a hate crime, which is really sketchy and dangerous to me. When we start to create language around things and then create set punishments around things, it is usually a way to not deal with what a root issue is, or to get a quick fix without unpacking it properly. So again, my question is, who does it benefit for us all to be so afraid of unchecked crime? And if the solution is, again, I'm just going to keep it a buck. If the solution is more police, then why is it continuing to happen? Why has it happened in all of these periods of time when such an enormous amount of the budget has been allocated to the police? And I'm sitting at a table with people who realize no money was taken away from the police. The police actually got a larger budget this year than they got in the previous year. And this is the current state of violence. And I'm extremely concerned when we do things like bring the highway patrol in, because we have people who are now afraid for their safety. When I hear people in East Oakland, in Black communities, who feel like the murder rate makes them want more police. And I'm reminded of the war on drugs, when misinformation rolled through the community in such a sophisticated and manner and at such a high level, until Black people begged for 3 strikes. Now we know how that story ended, right? So we're at that moment again as we invite the highway patrol in with the history of the biasness in traffic stops to tend to a rising level of violence in Black and API communities. And it's all being languaged like people have all gone wild, and the only thing will solve this is more police. This is a very dangerous narrative, and it serves no one but those who benefit from dividing us, those who need for us to be divided. I think you're muted,
Excuse
James.
me, I was muted.
Yeah.
You kept it $1.50, and I appreciate that. Council President, we are going to turn to you. I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot. I know you were as surprised as many people when the announcement came that CHP was coming to town from Governor Newsom. But I think just zooming out a little bit, I've known your approach to your work on the council to be focused on rationality and data and common sense and evidence-based, practices, and I've also known that there are other people for whom those are not priorities, and a lot of people naturally are very scared in our communities because what they hear is that the sky is falling, and they hear it, 24/7 on, all of the media outlets that they've grown to rely upon, even some on the left. And so I wonder how you approach that and your attempt to do what's best for a city when it comes to public safety, when a lot of misinformation, makes that endeavor difficult and at times unpopular.
Great question, James, and great framing, Dr. Nzinga. I think we are living in such a historic time in so many ways. I mean, just think about how we have been in a global pandemic for over a year, sheltering in place for over a year, and the disconnection that so many people have, the taking away of your regular routines, your stability, and how the economy has also contributed to that. And so, this is a time where more than ever, I think that people need to feel connected to their family, to their community, and the violence that is happening and the trauma that people are feeling, the fear people is feeling is very, very real. And my approach is to step back because the traditional approach of punishment and policing has not been creating stronger communities and more stable communities. And what I have been trying to do with community and with some allies on council is really shift to an approach of community safety that is an approach of prevention and healing. And with this budget, which I know all of you participated in, an approach to public safety and community safety that recognizes we need a whole infrastructure because that infrastructure has been dismantled. We know that from the federal level on down, that public housing, healthcare, education, so many things have been dismantled and disinvested in. And in its place, what has really grown and been funded is the criminal legal system and the carceral system, right? And so there's been decades of that structural disinvestment and imbalance. It's going to take us years. And being here with artists and culture workers, it's going to take a real narrative shift and a culture shift to get to the place that we can dream about, but we know doesn't exist yet. So James, as you asked me about my approach, I'm really trying to have an approach as a council member and as council president, shepherding this last budget, an approach of looking at data and facts, looking at financial responsibility. And you all have heard this from me before when we look at our general fund, and that's the fund that we have the most ability to invest with. It's not restricted like most of Oakland's budget when we only spend 2% on violence prevention, on libraries, on parks, a small fraction on cultural affairs. How are we nurturing our communities? And so what we're really trying to do is redistribute that pie. We're trying to recognize what could work. It's a more comprehensive system that recognizes the things that make people whole and that keep people safe and connected to their community are those opportunities for stable housing, a good job, arts, culture, libraries, parks, all of those things that I think people know really well. And when I think about Chinatown, the work I've been doing in Chinatown, the broad investments that we are making in Chinatown will create a safer Chinatown in terms of investing in small businesses, keeping our streets clean and in repair, well lit, keeping our parks active, programming our rec center, making sure that seniors and families and young people can be on our streets, running errands, going to the park, doing all kinds of things. And it's really that active, vibrant community, which is what I dream about in terms of a safe Oakland. It's not necessarily a community that has more police on our streets. It's a community that has so many things where the police are much more accountable and part of our community, recognizing that we need police in this sort of interim term as we shift the balance of being much more centered on healing, prevention, and community.
Thank you so much. I certainly don't envy your role as council president in this moment, and at the same time, so appreciate all that you bring to the table. I'm going to pass it over to you, Mush. You just heard Dr. Nzinga and Council President Bas, and I know that in your work you can often serve as a bridge. I mean, we just heard through your poetry how you are able to bridge cultures. And so I wonder if you could speak to your work and how you try to use it to bridge communities as one of the culture keepers here in Oakland.
Great question. How do I use it to bridge cultures? I mean, the particular art form that I steward, in part, was passed down to me. It's an oral African tradition. It's a Senegalese tradition. The griot, the person whose role in the community it is to jest and joke, and in some ways also serve as the community's historian. And so I think part of what I do is also recognize that one of the greatest kind of simplest tools that any of us can use in the pursuit of creating a more just presence, I think, is to honor and acknowledge those from whom your talents, your gifts, or your assets have been bestowed to you from. And so that's part of that is like, this is, you go all the way back to Senegal, but then let's, jazz, hip hop, American hip hop, let's just be real, that's Black culture. And so I have been deeply rooted in knowing that history. I think art, if and art is such a big term, but what I find with artists is that all of us are observers of the world. We're all looking at each other and what's happening, and our tool, whether it's the paintbrush or the pen or the mic or the drum, whatever it is, we're trying to get to some deeper truth. Where I know I hate the term I don't see color, or we're so like post-race. I really hate that. But for the writer, for the healer, for the artist, there's somewhere even beyond that narrative, like post-racial America, post-racial society. We are trying to get to a different space where we understand just the root, kind of the soul motivations for why we are who we are and how we love the way we do and why we close up the way we do. And so I think from that framework or perspective, it's easy to use art to connect. The whole fundamental thing about art is that it requires somebody else. Like, it requires, even if it's just the divine, it requires a speaker and a listener. That's just, and that speaker is also the listener is also so that reciprocal relationship is embedded into all art. And so it's really, it's not that hard. Now, when you put art in a museum and you say you have to pay $50 to get in, and then I'm going to highly curate it so that certain parts of the globe are privileged or advantaged, then, then we get into the politics of like high art and whatever, or in street art or whatever. But on a broad, I think artists are always trying to get to understanding why we are the way that we are. And to me, that connects. I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to figure that out.
Wow. Dr. Nzinga, I wonder if you have any thoughts or comments about on that thought.
Art is like a passport. And, I said there's a paradox that I walk with. And one is that all Black everything until it's done, until freedom is here. The paradox is Blackness doesn't exist. Race doesn't exist. So all of this effort to animate the imaginative thing that I am a part of that gives animus to white supremacy, which also doesn't exist. So art is like the place for me where the paint goes all the way up the wall. There is no such thing as art for art's sake. Every artist is revealed in the art they make, no matter how much trouble they go to obscure themselves in the work. And the best work speaks across humanity. Banksy just came out today and claimed 3 murals, one of which is a child who is building a sand castle on top of cracked concrete. So you can interpret visual art in a lot of ways, but what that piece says for me is that the imagination, the fresh mind, because all artists are eternally children, interpreting the world, seeing it new and fresh every time they look at it. Artist, building over what's here, sandcastle on top of the cracked concrete. to me is the message that imagination will eventually get us into a more human-centered paradigm. We are in a material-centered paradigm in which the standardization and the normalization of whiteness is not good for anyone, not even white people. And so moving out of this paradigm into a new paradigm is human beings navigating the existential dread of chaos. And I think that art is the rope that we can hold on to that'll get us from one side to the other. Art is like the chat box on the side of the screen right now, where we work it out. You know, is it this? No, it's not that. It's this. Look at it like this. It's the place where the conversation that will right the world and allow us all to be human is being had.
Thank you so much. Shifting gears a little bit here, and excuse me for being moved personally as we move through this conversation. Dr. Nzinga since the first time I heard you speak, Dr. Nzinga, and it was at Cat Brooks's mayoral announcement, I believe. You gave a speech in her little. I don't want to digress too far, but the bottom line is, since then, I've just really appreciated the way you use words to describe the Black experience, and it speaks to so many things that I am unable to articulate, and thus makes it difficult when you bring them out in conversation that I'm supposed to be facilitating. So thank you so much. I do want to turn the conversation a little bit. I did hear Council President Bas, you spoke briefly on what public safety means to you. And so I just wanted to hear a bit more from you about that, and then invite our other panelists to discuss their visions of safety and what community safety means to them.
Sure. Thank you, James. So, for me, community safety means that you have the ability to really thrive in your community. You've got your basic needs met, like affordable housing, a good job, a good school for your kid, good health care. You're able to shop and bank and dine and do other things in your neighborhood, walk your streets. And I want to underscore something that I've really been trying to have more conversation about, which is how complex safety is. Because of what has happened with levels of investment by government over many, many decades, we think of safety as traditional policing. And yes, it absolutely is that. And that policing has to be accountable. It has to be effective. And it has to be paired with violence prevention and addressing those other basic needs that I just talked about. And so I really want to push our communities to think about safety as, accountable, effective policing and violence prevention, and all of those things that you want for yourself and your family to be safe. And I see some of the conversation in the chat, and I certainly have talked with a number of community members, including in Chinatown, and AAPI community members who do want more policing. And what I say back is, Oakland has been fully funded and is currently fully funded. We spoke earlier about misinformation. Some basic information that the community needs to know is that the mayor proposed the current budget. Her budget reduced some levels of policing around foot patrol, traffic safety, and other types of policing. Now, what the council did by supermajority with my budget is we adopted the mayor's budget. And again, her budget did balance by reducing some police services. We adopted her budget, and the only thing that we changed is we kept level the police academies at 2 per year. And with that, we had to freeze some positions at the end of the fiscal year next year. So right now, the level of policing is exactly what the mayor proposed. I think that's really important. And when I talk about accountable policing, I think many people who are Oaklanders know what that means, because we've had to deal with so many challenges, including being under a negotiated settlement for almost 20 years, right? And we've had to deal with police scandals, the rape of a minor, things that have really been, very, very challenging to overcome. And when we look at whether our police is effective, I've been trying to have people understand, police respond to violent and serious crime. That's really what they should be focused on. But when you look at the data and see what they're responding to, over 60% of the calls they respond to are actually non-criminal. So somebody else should be doing that work. They should be investigating and solving crime. And when you look at that data, the solve rates for homicides are about 50%, and that's below the national average. And then when you look at robberies, we're talking about single-digit success rates. We look at the police academies, which the council wants to evaluate before we invest more. The graduation rates are 44%. And so, James, when you asked me what my approach is as a council member, we have a fiduciary responsibility, ability to spend that $600 million plus effectively. And those numbers show that we need to be much more effective. And, for me personally, I am working with the police officers in my district, with the police chief, with the council members to make the system work better. It has to work better, be accountable, and it also has to be paired with those solutions that are about prevention and healing, because our communities have really suffered under the current system.
Yes, absolutely. I will underscore that last sentence for sure. And again, appreciate you for, this is not the first or the fifth or the 10th time I've heard you walk through those points. And I think it's important to underscore for our listeners who might not be familiar, this is fighting back against misinformation that has persisted as part of our current administration in Oakland. The strategy is to obscure the truth and obscure the facts and to play to the base fears of our societies in hopes that will justify maintaining a status quo. And I think what's important to point out for our listeners, because I'm not, I don't have to maintain relationships with some of these members of government, is that the folks who are, opposed to what Council President Bas are doing, they don't have a plan. They don't have a public safety plan. They're not, they don't have a theory of change that involves the police, where the police are going to do X, Y, Z, and then people are going to be safer, right? They're just managing political relationships because that's what they need to do to be reelected, because that's how our system works, right? And so I don't want to digress too far in that direction. I just wanted to provide that context before we shift back into a more happy place of discussing the things that, hopefully discussing the things that do keep us safe, or I think of police as weeds in the garden. What is this garden we are trying to grow of community safety? Mush, maybe you can bring us to that space, into, what makes your garden grow, if I can continue a mediocre metaphor.
It's a good metaphor. I like it. I wish you would have called on me, because as I was listening to Council President Bas speak, I was getting fired up and I had all of my notes and all of my arguments. And let me try to bring it back to the garden metaphor. I'll just say this, because I have to say it, which is right now on Arundhati Roy, Adrienne Marie Brown, a lot of women of color who have studied systemic racism and institutional oppression on all the different levels are saying right now is a portal, right? Everything, conglomerates across the globe are putting out messages about Black Lives Matter and how sacred Black lives are and how it's important to invest in systemic change. And yet the narrative, when there's even an idea to try to reimagine public safety, differently, everyone clams up. To me, that makes no sense. When we talk about the best foods, we talk about a diversity of herbs and spices. When we talk about an investment portfolio, we talk about a diversity of investment strategies. I think part of what's missing, and I think somebody in the chat might have said it, communities of color, whether it's Black communities or API communities, can't seem to find a consensus around how to address this thing. Part of it is that we don't need necessarily a consensus. Part of us is a re-education of understanding the function of the police state. That's one. The second is that I think all of us need to re-understand that, sure, police can be one arm of addressing really, really violent crimes, but what are our alternatives, right? We are only calling 911. That's all we've ever known. So the most vibrant, the strongest ecosystems are the most diverse. And so if we think about public safety, I think the same metaphor applies. It has to be diverse. And right now it's a monolith. It's the police or lock your door and buy a gun. And though I'm just not living in that world, because everyone is telling me in the culture that, you know what, the way that we used to do things in the past, we're not going to do that anymore. Same applies. For me, at least when it comes to public, we're not doing that anymore. We're thinking about other ways. And again, it's not a divisive this versus that, because binaries to me are also of the past. We're not thinking binaries, this or that. We're thinking diversification. So with that said, okay, what do I want to grow?
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe I just want to make sure we have Dr. Nzinga has a chance to address that.
Yes.
Maybe we can turn the corner.
Please.
Yes. Again, on this thing about misinformation and framing, which then gives people bad information on which to make decisions. Saying what Councilperson Bas said in a different way. With all the police that we have ever had, you can't park your car downtown Oakland without somebody breaking the window. And I'm seeing the same BMW pull up in Chinatown over and over and over again. And some people who look like they're the same people hopping out and banging people. And with all the police we have ever had, they can't catch them. And so the solution cannot be to hire more of them, to give them more money, to bring in different sets of them from different places. Why would we give something, you've heard the saying, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. This is broken. It needs to be fixed. It's said that insanity, a simple definition, is to do the same thing over and over again and to look for a different solution. So we have policed and we have policed and we have policed. And the history of the police is the protection of property. And there was a very sensitive and intelligent question that asked, have we tried talking to the pro-cop people? And Council President Bas is the council president for all of the people. And there are people who seem to think that if we can get some more police, or we can retrain the police, or if we can get a police bigger toys, that something then will make them solve more homicides and solve more robberies. I'm sorry, I disagree. I just completely disagree. I am not going to be mind tricked into begging for 3 strikes. We need something we've never had before. If the council person tells you that statistically we've de-invested in public safety nets, we've de-invested in feeding families. If you want to understand, we have de-invested in keeping people housed. All you got to do is walk outside of wherever you live, unless it's Piedmont, where without the presence of any police, the sidewalks are relatively clear of homeless people. Mush made the point, I'm gonna make it again. What does it look like to have less police? I'm gonna steal from AOC. Looks like Piedmont. It looks like libraries and after school programs. It looks like houses with enough food in it to eat. It looks like campuses with books and libraries that are open and internet access and access to healthcare and access to substance abuse programs and access to mental health, access to financial literacy. It looks like culturally relevant tutoring, culturally relevant enrichment activities inside your community where you don't have to cross 3 or 4 boundaries and go to places that are new and strange to you in order to have all of the things that everybody all over the city should have. Community well-being brings about safety. Fully employed, housed, well-fed, cultured people don't by and large kill each other. And if they do, then the rest of this well-nurtured community stands up and outs those cancers. What we have now grows the cancer.
Thank you so much. Again, I want to point out, I think it's poignant that you bring up the statistics that Council President brought up regarding robbery or getting your car broken into. We know several weeks ago, Barbara Boxer was robbed in Oakland, and that was a highly publicized incident. They said we needed more police. But again, as the Council President pointed out, the clearance rate for robbery in the city of Oakland is 6%. 6% of robberies result in someone being held accountable in the city of Oakland. And so it's those stark numbers and that lie that is being delivered to the people that we attempt to lift up over and over again until, public education can trump misinformation. And so I do see we are rounding out on our time here. And so I want to, I love the vision that you just provided. Well, I don't love a vision of Piedmont, but I do love a vision of the amenities in Piedmont as a successful and thriving community. Mush, I'm going to swing it back to you to answer the same question before we give it to the Council President for the final word.
What was the question, James?
Oh, sorry. Just swinging it back to what makes the garden grow. The metaphor came back. Yeah. What is a thriving community to you, and what would bring about public safety in your vision of a community? If it's not the police, what is it?
I mean, it's everything Dr. Nzinga just said. It's all of the different ways that we can rethink public safety that Council President Bas mentioned. It's all of those things. It's not having to fight for resources too. It's not having to fight for what we know is it fills our soul. It strengthens connection. Council President Bas talked about what we need right now are deeper levels of true connection and being seen and seeing others. And we have for generations have had to fight tooth and nail for the basic things. I think part of safety is not having to fight for that. It's so ingrained in our culture, and now it's embedded in my blood, and all I know how to do is now fight. What would that look like if I could just rest? And, I had excellent quality arts and culture programs for myself and my children, clean water. What if there's a way that our indigenous Ohlone were stewards of all of the waterways in our region? These are the ways that I think about what it means. And also, what if there was a different way of engaging each other in our micro neighborhoods? Like, I know what the neighbor down the hall, what medications they need on what particular day, not because it's all prescribed, no pun intended, but because that is just that's the fabric of how we get down. We source each other and resource each other. And I think, I also think on a basic level, like a nice smile or like a hi or a head nod, like would be great. It'd be amazing. You'd be amazed how many people don't like to give a head nod these days. I'm like, come on, man, a head nod is gonna be fine. So maybe like a basic head nod too. But those are my big dreams.
I like that. Council President, swing it to you for the final word.
That's a little bit of pressure getting the final word here, but given that we are celebrating art and culture, one thing I would really love to see in Oakland is much, much more organized and frequent music, art, and cultural festivals. You know, when I think about what would make Oakland even better, what would get people connected, you know, the Malcolm X Jazz Festival, which many of you know, hosted by the East Side Arts Alliance. We haven't been to San Antonio Park for that festival in a couple years. I would love to see that festival and many others in every single council district from east to west and in between. You know, have a calendar of events, concerts, festivals, fairs, markets in our public parks and public spaces, and have that be something that every Oaklander becomes familiar with. You know, it's January, there's this festival here. It's February, there's the Lunar New Year Festival in Chinatown. You know, it's August, it's Black August. BAM Fest is happening. So I would love us as a city, as a community, to really think about what's the programming that we can do in our public spaces, knowing that, you know, we need to do more things outdoors. We need to build community, and what better way to do it but with art and culture.
Thank you so much, Council President. And again, thanks to all three of you for sharing your wisdom, your hearts, and your energy with us all this evening. We're going to close with Dr. Nzinga, Oakland's Poet Laureate, blessing us with some of her work before we say goodnight.
Sorry, Ayodele, your audio is muted.
You know, I swear I looked at that and it wasn't muted. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to do two pieces. The first piece frames the set, and it's called Wind Walker. The wind at your back wraps your coat around you, pushes you forward, or lays you low. The wind is ever at your back. It will not rest, so you cannot. Time spilling all the right now there is right here on the road. The wind at your back. The sound of it, howling, snapping, a belt tightening, miles to go, task for the ancestors, food for the future, the gift for the present. The wind at your back. Because changes work for the constant minded. I offer the long distance runner. I never was a sprinter. Perhaps I wanted to be bleached concrete, bright lights, places that rap genius and gaudy murder for trying not to be invisible, called to me since age 3. But higher powers had a plan for me. Ancestors whispering, walk with great faith to your fate. That's your destiny. See me? I'm a long distance runner, built to go the distance, not so much for speed. The sleeper, natural, late blooming prodigy, the 3-orbed interlocutor, the hood's oracle, all eyes set intently on eternities. Time has no meaning to me. Who measures oceans when the destiny is to flow into them like seas? Thunder does not fear lightning. I have come to Rumi's garden and lingered to stroll beyond it to an open field of nuanced understanding. I am a long distance runner. I sat at the feet of my Baba, becoming as North American Africans consumed by coerced evolution, studied revolutions in China, Cuba, Bolivia. His windows, once open, shattered, his doors slammed shut. I witnessed the fall of Camelot, a king, a shining prince, as panthers roared but were snared in nappy nets as suns set before fully rising. Multiple murderers, one hand buying all the bullets, nefarious, draped in off-the-shoulder hubris and a pale blue blonde dress. I am a long-distance runner. Blood of conquering conjurers, Nat Turner, Hannibal, Queen Nzinga. I walk a path worn smooth by the makers of a way out of no way, bowing only before gods, snuggled in the tight, airless funk of good ships fit with shackles, the ocean wind, all creation melted to fit inside the myth of a Holy Ghost, still favoring drums, the horse eaters, runaway slaves, and those long-eyed boys glued to the sidewalk on city corners, running from the law, even in still moments, folded between lynchings and picnics. The preacher's wife and the coroner all say ashe. To the path makers, guardians of the seasons, sunrise, birth, death, sunset, keepers of eternities, owning the wind, real rain makers, the line that winds back to the beginning of time. I am without beginning or end. I am built to go the distance, not so much for speed. Time has little meaning when you're looking at the sky. From above, upper rooms where alchemists tinker with surety to author impossible destiny, prismatic overstanding, hexing my oppression. Time is a silk thread on which I am a bead, strung in a succession of beautiful beads, each a life, a world, hanging from the neck of the God's true love. Multiple verses in a sonnet, being remembered by the multiverse. I remember when there were no astronomers, only dog star people who remembered the invisible. No more resurrect us explicit. I am. Before time was time, naked chaos surrendered to the ritual of living word. I am what I say I am, by the breath of my lungs, the tip of my tongue, a creator of galaxies and my reality. Let there be light to explore the sublimity of inky black darkness, perfection, perfected, personified, speaking invisible to visible, sewing together those dispersed like chaff, seeding a diaspora without a tongue. Thank the gods for drums, beating the time of hearts uncaptured, waiting time. Our feet learn to speak the unspeakable, dancing on oppression. We are dangerous, daring to be us when in rhythm. Without drum wisdom, in the madness of right now, the machete is the only song left in the box of crusted lies, the antidote, the cure we could sing here now, right now, loud and off key, outside and othered, where blood speaks to blood, calling blood, blood answers. Are you waiting for the album? Long distance runner driven by vision. I remember dancers, warriors, dipping fluid frames, breaking time as shields clash with dreams, as alien as the dreamers, the builders of fences, turning fireworks into guns, trafficking cocaine, opium, rum, sickness, madness, death since they come, dividing, poisoning, ravenous omnivores under one flag, crossbones and currency. Pale-eyed true believers with a long view. Time has no meaning if your name is dynasty, oligarchy, institutional whiteness. Script writers unfurling distortions of reality in 3D. See, believe, follow, or be the vibration of the drum. Watch the horizon for that long distance runner, oblivious to time, constant as the tide, in position of persistence, built to go the distance, not so much of speed. Done gone digital, mega global, maximizing the local, counting strands of resistance numbered like stars in countless constellations. Long distance runner dreams, one struggle, one nation, one direction, ever forward, cross borders, many tongues, new dances, air broken by militant fists and a million lips proclaiming disdain of denials, deconjuring the constraints, not asking, taking reparation, agents of change, cyber drums aligned in the chaos, flash micro revolutions, fade the ever evolution, may the way makers will be done. All say, no band-aids, just solutions. An eye on the prize kind of ride, pushing the pendulum with every stride, creating the vortex we travel in, the eye of the whirlwind, running viral across airwaves, invisible, tremble if we become indivisible. I remember when music was invisible, crossing Jordan, charted by the North Star, movement got us this far. Swing down, chariot, dreams of trains, still want to ride in memory of miles, Pullman porters and losses to other folks' wars. We still water running through the blues, marching to the gospel of locomotives. We got dreams, dreams of distance growing from blood-stained trees. We got funk-soaked aspirations, realities carved at the high cost of constant resistance. Who can be well in sickness? Much time fighting, need more time building. Destruction is means, not end. Disruption is only the forward to the book of what comes next. We need new dances. Got to stay limber in this limbo of post-colonial smelting, stewing in his pot of post-racism, form a second line and fearlessly cheer without fear of time that has always had its own mind in a world that's forever been full of clear and present danger, kidnappers, lawless thugs authoring law, guilty of stealing continents, soiling the air, leveling mountains to build condos out of oversized egos, compensating for lack that creates unquenchable thirst in anemic slivers of soul. Claim the time for a second wind. You can savor the journey if you're sure of the inheritance. New music, the constancy of drummers drumming, and long distance runners that come to run. Ashe, oh, po, oh. Thank you. Akemi?
And sorry, I am now muted. I was just saying my deep gratitude to you, Dr. Nzinga. What a phenomenal way to finish. And I know that our time flew by too fast for this. I wish we could have sat in the room and listened for another couple hours because I know we were just getting started. I just wanted to also quickly bring up to the screen for a virtual curtain call. And for all of you watching, please give your applause to all of our wonderful panelists and guests, including our backstage staff, Rachel, who's been monitoring the chat for us. So all those links you've been seeing and the reactions, thank you, Rachel, for covering that. And again, my gratitude to all of you. Thank you so much. I know that each one of you could easily hold your own solo weekend-long seminar on any of these topics. So it's quite the challenge. Thank you, James, for managing the space and time available for us to do some really thoughtful dives into really timely topics. So with that, I wanted to address the audience and the listeners here. If you found anything, really inspiring, really resonant, if there was anything here that helps you to, realize what are the dominant narratives that are being offered to you and how can we maybe reframe and challenge some of those. If you think of other folks who couldn't make it today, who could really benefit from listening to all the wealth of information and wisdom that all of our speakers shared today, please share this recording, the live stream URLs will stay alive as post-event recordings. So you can always rewatch and share and spread the word. I think, let's see, Rachel, did you pop in our, yes, survey link for OACC, just to do due diligence to wearing my staff hat. If you can let us know how today's event was, we would love to get some input into our survey. So please let us know how we can, continue to support amazing community workers and cultural workers in our, diverse community. We would love to hear back from you. So with that said, I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for spending part of it with us today, and we hope to see you again in the future. Bye for now.